Has anyone actually seen in person at a wedding any people who have objected? What's the story? I saw this once. The pastor is asking this, and people are looking around. 23s of the way back is a very pregnant young lady standing up. People start to turn to look at her. She say, "I'm sorry, I have to pee, that was as a close one." My grandmother did when my loser uncle her son got married the 4th time. She told the woman she could do better. I was shooting a wedding video. The preacher gets to that part, and just as he says, "Or forever hold your peace," there was a huge peal of thunder. Lightning had hit a TV tower on the other side of the valley. I'd seen the strike and had just enough time to think that's gonna be loud and cover my ears. After the thunder died away, there was a long pause and the preacher said, "Well, that's never happened before." It was awesome. A fake they are still married. There wasn't an objection, but my cousin's rehearsal dinner was nuts. The bride and the maid of honor were both pregnant by the groom and the best man, but vice versa. Of what you think? It all came to a head because the best man spoke up that the wedding was a bad idea. The groom's dad stood up and loudly said, "It's not too late, son." Right as the bride was coming down the aisle. She sobbed the whole way down and the show went on. They are divorced now. So kinda, but not really. I was maid of honor at my best friend's wedding, and her dad had some mental health issues along with a tendency to be annoying. I knew that when the groom had asked her dad for permission to marry her, he had technically said no. So we were all on pins and needles a bit. The time came for the "does anyone object" question, and the dad steps up to speak. And I watch my friend's face go completely ashen and I'm ready to throw up or throw hands or something. And the dad says, "Growing up, bride's name always hated this song, and we always joked that we'd sing it at her wedding, so here it is." And he and her mother proceed to sing the song, while I bore a hole in his face with my eyes, and a few of the guests try to force awkward courtesy chuckles. It was awful. The night before my cousin's wedding, her ex-BF showed up to her parents' house with the intention of making an 11th hour plea for her not to go through with the wedding and take him back instead. Luckily she was out with her sisters dropping the cake off at the hotel for the reception, so she didn't have to deal with it, and my uncle eventually got the guy to leave, threatened to call the police in the end. The next morning at the church, there were a load of guests very discreetly put on the alert that this guy could show up and try to disrupt things. Luckily the wedding went off without a hitch, but we found out later that he actually had turned up at the church. But the sacristan had been standing just outside the door and clocked him heading in and managed to hold him off in the car park. Apparently it was just getting to the point that the sacristan was worried the ex was about to make a dash for the church when a car pulled up and 3 of his friends got out and kinda talked him down and then took him away. Oh, let me tell you a juicy story. At my cousin's wedding, just as the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, my aunt stood up and exclaimed that the groom was still legally married to his ex-wife. Chaos ensued as everyone gasped in shock, and the bride burst into tears. It turned out to be a case of mistaken identity, as my aunt had confused the groom with someone else. But for a brief moment, it felt like we were in the middle of a real-life soap opera. My sister had her wedding in our backyard. When asked if there are objections, the family dog got up, walked to the minister, barked once, turned back and sat down. Went to a wedding by the shore, and when the officiant asked this question, a seagull who had come to watch gave a really loud squawk. Was at a wedding years ago. When the question was asked, the bride's father stood up and asked her, "Are you absolutely sure you want to marry this guy?" Since the back 2 rows on the groom's side had a bet on this, we all were then cleared to start drinking. To be fair, they are still married and still in love, and her dad still hates the man because he works for himself and not a company. Her dad hates that he has a successful business. So fun fact, the whole objecting to the wedding thing was not done to give someone an opportunity to object if they didn't approve of the wedding. It was done to give someone a chance to object if they knew the couple can't be married. Dates back to a time long ago when public records were non-existent, sparse, small communities might be pretty isolated from others. Many marriages were arranged and people only met near the wedding, etc. So asking this question wasn't a chance for an old boyfriend to proclaim his undying love. It was a time for great-grandma to stand up and let everyone know that actually, the bride and groom were first cousins by that floozy of a daughter who ran off to the big city 30 years ago that nobody talks about. Or for Joe the farmer from 2 counties over to stand up and inform everyone that the groom was actually already married and had abandoned his family and moved to set up a new life. Things like that. So it was more about it would be a violation of Gov church laws if these people got married, not so much I don't want these people to get married. Well, it was technically an objection, I think. It was my uncle and his fiancée. For context, he is a woman abuser. He is a violent, alcoholic, drug-addicted man-child. He is a felon who has spent a lot of time in jail for domestic violence. He can barely keep a job because he is lazy. He had already been violent with his fiancée. It was a very tiny wedding, like maybe 15 people in attendance or something. The mom of the bride is hysterically sobbing in her seat. As soon as they say "I do," she throws herself back and starts motioning a stabbing motion to her heart, and someone has to pick her up and take her away. It was a whole lot. When I officiated for my friends, I phrased it as, if there's anyone here who may I object to this marriage. You had a decade to make your opinion known, so can it? Not a wedding, but a proposal. Back in my mid-20s when I was single, I was a bartender at a fancy steakhouse in my city. Valentine's Day was always a sellout night. I randomly had that night off, so a co-worker of mine and I ponied up to the bar for a few free drinks before going out for the night. Place was jamming busy. Suddenly this dude shouts for the whole restaurant's attention from the middle of the dining room. Place gets church quiet lickety-split. He gets down on one knee and pulls out a Rin. She lets him get through his whole spiel before literally laughing in his face and saying no. No. No, 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 no. And hightailing it out of there. Guy kind of climbs back into his chair dejected. Owner of the restaurant walks over with a highball glass, literally fills it with whiskey, pats him on the back, and goes, "Dinner's on us, bud." Restaurant slowly went back to normal. Apparently the guy didn't leave for like 2 more hours. Not an objection during ceremony. But right before my old maid great aunt told me as I was about to go down the aisle I didn't have to do it. I did it anyway, shook violently through the ceremony, and the marriage was over in less than 2 years. Here's the thing about old maid aunts, they are very keen observers of humankind, and therefore many are single by choice. Lol. Not an objection, but definitely an awkward moment. One of my uncles was getting married, and his soon-to-be wife wasn't quite as well liked by certain members of our family. She was more liberal than some others. She was seen as dramatic or eccentric, etc. I don't remember the exact words, but during the vow she was making comments about their cats and something about musical theater, and was pretty emotional. One of my other uncles said, not quite under his breath, "Jesus, good luck man," when it was dead silent. It made my stepdad chuckle, and my mom and my aunt gave them the dirtiest looks. They got divorced a few years later because my uncle is trash. I felt bad for her, because I really liked her, but she's honestly doing much better without him. Guy stood up and said he had fucked the bride a few months prior. Then another guy got up and said the same. It was some Spartacus shit going on as another stood up. Turns out she'd been making the rounds through this guy's family. None of them were going to say anything, but one guy cracked, and it was enough for the guilt to overflow on the rest, including the best man, who was bright fucking red in the face when he stammered out that he had, too, not, but a 2 weeks prior. Open bar though, so that was nice. No, but I wish someone would have objected to my first marriage. Kind of, but during the reception. When my friend got married, she intentionally didn't ask her dad to make a speech, knowing he didn't approve of the groom, and during the reception he got rip-roaring drunk and snatched the microphone out of the DJ's hands and made one anyway. He went on for a good few minutes about how the groom was trash, and his daughter could do much better, before several of her cousins managed to wrestle the microphone away from him and get him into a car to take him back to the hotel. It was super cringy.